How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Infinite Sports. I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, to talk about a few NFL topics on the show today. So, a break from the Yankees. I know some people are probably happy about that, but some headlines that I wanted to discuss as we get closer and closer to the start of the NFL season in a couple of weeks, and college football begins this week as well. We have week 0, so a lot of football coming up, which I'm really excited about. But some NFL topics I wanted to get into. Matthew Stafford, wanted to talk about him, give you updates on that. Also, get into talking about quarterback jobs, who will be starting week 1. A couple of quarterbacks were named starters for week 1 that I wanted to discuss a little bit. And then give you a reaction from last night's game between the Commanders and the Bengals. So let's talk about Matthew Stafford. So, for a while now, there's been a lot of concern surrounding the Rams and their starting QB because Matthew Stafford has been dealing with a disc in his back that's kind of prevented him from getting started here as, we get towards the end of the preseason. And, the Rams are a team that have Super Bowl aspirations, and I don't want to open the curtain, but I guess I will a little bit. This is a team that I was thinking about picking to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. And hearing all the Stafford news and the unknowns of when he's going to return to practice and what have you, I was going to probably pivot and think of a different team. But encouraging news, Stafford did return to practice, so that's good on that front. And the Rams go from there. And like I said, the Rams have Super Bowl aspirations. You look at the defense last year, a lot of young players, they grew as the season went along, and they wreaked havoc on teams, and they really pushed the Eagles to the last second in that divisional round. And the Rams came very close to knocking off the Eagles in the snow, but that wasn't the case. They fell a little bit short. But the defense has really come along, and they're going to continue to be a force this year with the young players that they have. And they also added Devontae Adams in the offseason to pair up with Puka Nacua. You still got Kyron Williams. The offensive line, when healthy, is solid. So, and of course, you got Sean McVay, who's one of the best head coaches in the league. Now, if Stafford goes down at any point in the season, that significantly hurts their chances of getting to a Super Bowl. Because next up is Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, Jimmy Garoppolo can win you games, and he has played in the Super Bowl. So it's not like if Stafford got hurt, the Rams are just going to tank. No, because they do have a good enough team. And like I said, Garoppolo, he can win you games. But if they want to get to a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl, it's got to be with Matthew Stafford behind center. Now, with Stafford being back at practice, it is very encouraging. But you still worry about that as an injury that lingers. And also, he's not a spring chicken. He's an old quarterback. He's, I think, 37. And, the Rams, they open up the season against a very tough defense in the Houston Texans, who are going to get after Matthew Stafford. So you do worry about that matchup in week 1. And obviously, at any point, Stafford takes a vicious hit and, he could be out. So, but compared to where we were a few weeks ago, where, the Rams are, throughout this process, they've kind of been very cryptic, they're unsure of what the timeline is for his return. We've made it through that, and Stafford, for the moment, back at practice, and, the Rams are going to be ready to rock and roll in a couple of weeks. But like I said, with Stafford healthy, and this Rams team, the way they finished off the year last year, came up a little bit short. If everything goes well for them this year, they're going to be one of the top teams in the NFC. Now, you do worry about the division. Seattle's looked pretty good in the preseason, so, you're going to have to worry about them. And I wouldn't completely, count out the 49ers. I think the 49ers, I know some people are down on them, but I think with an easier schedule, I think they could bounce back potentially. They do have, they did go through a lot of changes, let go of some guys in the offseason, traded some people away, and you got guys, that aren't going to be ready for the start of the season, particularly Brandon Ayuk. So there are a lot of question marks surrounding the 49ers, but I think you still got to give them a little bit of respect. And the Cardinals at certain points last year weren't a bad team, but they did, fall flat towards the end, as, they typically do. So the division's going to be tough. The NFC, you got a lot of teams you're going to have to deal with outside of the division, obviously the team that you just played in the playoffs last year and that won the Super Bowl, the Philadelphia Eagles. You got the Commanders, all the teams in the NFC North. So the NFC, I wouldn't say is as loaded as the AFC, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. But I think the Rams, if everything goes well, like I said, they are going to be one of the top teams in the conference. Like I said, if everything goes well. So, but good news on the Stafford front. He's back. And, let's see what happens. Week 1 against the Texans. It's going to be a tough matchup, tough pass rush to go up against. So we will see. Some pretty good games in the Week 1 slate. So let's get into now talking about the preseason game from last night, Bengals Commanders. So we did see a heavy dose of Joe Burrow. Did see a little bit of Jamar Chase making plays, Chase Brown. The Bengals don't want to get off to a slow start like they have in years past. They want to get off to a fast start because that's really part of the reason why they missed the playoffs last year is because, again, they get off to these slow starts. In past years, when they get off to these slow starts, they're able to overcome it and make the playoffs and be a playoff team. Now, last year, the slow start and on top of that, the defense, which we will talk about, did not play well. And, yeah, the Bengals, they finished off the season as one of the hottest teams in the NFL, but they came up short of the playoffs. And the year before that, Joe Burrow got hurt. So if Joe Burrow doesn't get hurt, maybe they still get in. And despite Joe Burrow getting hurt, they still finished with a winning record at 9-8. So playing the starters in the preseason, I do like this approach just because, again, you're getting those reps, and that way you're not just coming in week 1 and this is your first official game action. So having said that, I was cringing at the screen at times watching this game last night because Joe Burrow is running for his life last night at certain points. He almost took a safety. He was getting sacked and just taking hits in August. And you hear Joe Buck saying, "Go down, Joe, it's August," saying all that. And Lisa Salter said the same thing to Jaden Daniels on the other side, why he didn't just go down when he scored on a touchdown run in the game last night early on. Why did Joe Burrow just go down? Because if you get hurt, then you're really done. But, the Bengals did put up a couple of scoring drives. Again, and I guess Zach Taylor left Joe Burrow out there just to, again, continue to get those reps and, to end his night on a high note. And last night, he went 9 of 14 for 62 yards and a touchdown. And, he was in, I forget when exactly he got taken out, but did get the second scoring drive. He threw a 4-yard touchdown pass to Jones, so that made it, that would tie the game at that point, 14-14. I think that's when Burrow got taken out of the game. They did go for it on 4th down a couple times, but offensive line did not look that great last night at certain points for the Bengals, and also the defense. Yikes. That's all I have to say is yikes, because the Commanders made it look very easy on that Bengals defense last night. So Deebo Samuel make a play at one point. Looks faster. I mean, again, it's just one play. Last year was disappointing for him, and I feel like he is going to be rejuvenated in this offense. I think you're going to see a better version of Deebo Samuel than what we saw last year, and they're going to be trying. Terry McLaurin is on his way back. Supposedly a new deal is close, although it hasn't happened yet. So we'll have to wait on that. But the Commanders need Terry McLaurin back. But yeah, they went 4 plays, 74 yards, just under 2 minutes of time of possession. You had a 40-yard run by Chris Rodriguez, and then later Jane Daniels. We'll talk about Daniel Jones in a little bit. Jane Daniels scrambled for a 14-yard touchdown. Lisa Salter said, "Why didn't you go down?" Because he took on a couple of tacklers into the end zone. So yeah, that was a very easy drive. And then next drive for the Commanders, the Bengals then punted, and then the Commanders, they went 3 plays, 44 yards down the field for another touchdown. And Josh Johnson was in. They made it look very easy on that drive as well. So yeah, Bengals defense doesn't look good. And now you're hearing that the Bengals are, it seems like, listening. They're engaging in trade talks with Trey Hendrickson. So might be the final days of Trey Hendrickson in Cincinnati. Although I was watching a little bit of the Herd, and Albert Breer was on with Colin Cowherd, and he was talking about the trade package that it would take to get Trey Hendrickson, and the way he described it kind of would be something that would scare teams off because it's such a heavy price. And also, Trey Hendrickson is not, a young player. He's now in his 30s. He's 31 years old. So, are you going to want to do that? And on top of that, you're going to have to pay him as well for him to play. So it could be another Hassan Reddick situation where you trade for him and then you can't, figure out a contract, and then, Trey Hendrickson holds out, and then maybe you get him back later in the season and he really doesn't give you anything. So, look, Trey Hendrickson is a good player, and the Bengals, they need all the help they can get on defense, because the way that showed me last night, Bengals defense is still going to be a problem. And even before the game last night, you still kind of thought about that as well. I mean, especially with the Trey Hendrickson stuff. But, yeah, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem again. So, we're going to maybe see a repeat of last year. The Bengals are going to be a very good offense, but the defense is going to be an issue. You're going to see a lot of high-scoring games with the Bengals and whoever they play. Now, week 1, they play the Browns, and we'll talk about the Browns in a second. But for some reason, they did win there last year, but the Bengals have had a problem with the Browns in Cleveland outside of last year. So, we'll see how that shapes up. But there are tough games on the schedule. At one point later in the year, they play, I think it's between weeks 13 through 15. They got the Ravens, then they got the Bills, and then they got the Ravens again. That's a tough 3-game stretch. And there's other games on the schedule. They play the NFC North this year. There's tough games on that schedule for the Bengals. They're going up against some good offenses, some good quarterbacks. Defense is going to have to step up, but will it be able to? What I saw from last night doesn't look like that's going to be the case. And if you're going to be without your best pass rusher, your best defensive player, and he was a part of that defense last year, I mean, how is your defense going to be any better? We'll have to wait and see. But Burrow was getting me nervous last night taking these hits. Thankfully, he was fine. But, yeah, just go down. What are you doing? It's a meaningless game. But then if you go back to last year, I mean, that was a high-scoring game between the Commanders and the Bengals. Right? I think the final score was, 38-33? Something like that? Jaden Daniels lit up that defense. I don't think either team punted. I don't think either team punted that entire game. So, yeah, but my reactions from this game, Commanders, looked good, running the football. Jaden Daniels running the football himself. Bengals defense not so good. Bengals offensive line. Burrow, he was fine, but stop taking hits. So, one more preseason game to go. So now the final thing we are going to discuss, final topic, is a couple of quarterbacks will be starting week 1, Daniel Jones and Joe Flacco. So, did allude to it. Joe Flacco and the Browns will be taking on the Bengals week 1. Browns got a tough 6-game stretch to start the season, and that was something else that was talked about on the Herd when Albert Breer was talking to Colin Cowherd. So the Browns' first 6 games of the year. So you got the Bengals at home. Then you're at the Ravens, home against the Packers, at the Lions, home against the Vikings, and then at Pittsburgh. That is a very tough schedule to start off the year. Don't see a lot of wins in there. Now, I've said it all along, if you've paid attention, that I thought Joe Flacco would be named the starter. Flacco was a lock to make the roster because of, the experience, and you got these young quarterbacks on the team, and, I know Kenny Pickett you have there, but I would take Joe Flacco right now over Kenny Pickett, and that's not really saying that much. And, and Joe Flacco has been with the Browns before, that last, quarter of the season where, that led to him winning comeback player of the year a couple of years ago. Joe Flacco did a nice job. Now, it is a couple years later, so, obviously he is older. So that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to take the Browns on another magic carpet ride, and especially with the 6 games that I just told you about, it could be a disaster. But I think this is the right move. Flacco should be named the starter. He is the starter, and I have no problem with it. Look, the Browns are going to try, at least in the beginning of the year, to be competitive, if you want to say. Look, they still got the defense intact. Myles Garrett is signed to a long-term extension, and they also drafted Mason Graham, so you got that defensive line that's going to wreak havoc with those guys. You still got other good players on that defense. Denzel Ward, Jerry Jeudy had a good year last year, and he's going to take on that Amari Cooper role, because that was the connection that Flacco had a couple years ago. It was Amari Cooper, and Amari Cooper was his top target, one of his top targets. So, and Jeudy had a good year last year, so Flacco's going to be targeting him a lot. And also David Njoku had a good year as well or a good stretch with Flacco at quarterback as well. So he's going to benefit. His production's going to benefit from Flacco being back. And they got those 2 young running backs that they drafted as well. So I mean, there are some pieces that you got to like with the Browns, but it's not going to lead to a lot of wins this year. But at least for the moment, Flacco's going to start the beginning part of the season, and then if this season goes off the rails, which in all likelihood it probably will, then you will see a young quarterback, whether it's Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders. Again, Kenny Pickett's probably the odd man out, so he's going to end up getting traded and going elsewhere. And he just got traded this offseason from the Eagles to the Browns, so now in all likelihood he might be getting traded again. So we'll see. We'll see how it all shapes out, or maybe they trade one of the young quarterbacks. I don't know. But Flacco being named the starter, at least, for the short term, for the beginning part of the season, I think is the right move. And, let's see if he could take the Browns on another magic carpet ride, which I already told you is probably not going to happen. But, hey, we'll take it. So now the other quarterback that has been named a Week 1 starter, and this is, unlike Flacco, this is for the long term, people, at least for this season, the long term. Not he's going to start a few games and then the other quarterback's going to come in. Daniel Jones, old buddy Daniel Jones, former quarterback of the New York Giants, spent a little bit of time with the Vikings after the Giants cut ties with him last year. Colts bring him in, and they named him the starter. And Shane Steichen talked about it. Daniel Jones has played winning football back in 2022. He brought up 2022. They made it to the playoffs. He won a playoff game. This is going to be a long-term thing. And what does that mean for Anthony Richardson? Well, he's going to be on the bench. He's going to be on the bench. And I think when I was on with Dami, who hosts Sloppy Saturdays, you guys know Dami, right? I think I said Anthony Richardson should start the year, be put on a short leash, and, the second that he shows that he doesn't have it, then you put in Daniel Jones. Well, that's not happening at all. Daniel Jones is starting Week 1, and he's going to be starting basically the whole year, unless something happens. Or maybe he doesn't play well, and maybe they throw in Anthony Richardson. But then it just gets messy at that point. I mean, it already is a mess. But Daniel Jones has won the starting job, and I guess they just really got to that point where Anthony Richardson just doesn't look impressive. Also, on top of that, he gets injured in the first series, I think, of the preseason. And that's also the problem, too, is the productivity, but also the durability aspect as well. He's dealt with injuries. He basically missed his whole rookie season, right? The shoulder injury. So last year was really his rookie season, and he was not good. He was not good. And you had him tapping out in the middle of a game, which has never happened from a starting quarterback. The Anthony Richardson stock has really plummeted. And if he's not able to get back up from this and maybe go elsewhere and try to resurrect his career, he's going to go down as one of the biggest busts of all time. At least I would say My time. I know a lot of my friends liked him coming out of Florida, but they're like pretty much all off that train now because of what these last couple of years have shown us from him. And like I've told you guys, he throws a very pretty deep ball. And he chucks the ball down the field 60 yards to whoever's down there, and you're like, wow, that was impressive. And the size of this guy, he's got the mobility, could take on guys. He's got that Cam Newton factor to him. They could truck people and get a first down, and drive himself into the end zone for a touchdown near the goal line. The tools are there, but then he can't do the little things, or he throws a bad interception. It's a problem. And here we are now. Daniel Jones is the starter. Now, if Daniel Jones beats you out for the starting job, that's when you know it's just not working. It's just not working. Now, what can Daniel Jones give the Colts? I mean, I guess he is, he's the better option. It's not saying that much. Better option than Anthony Richardson. But can Daniel Jones work? Look, the Colts don't have a bad offensive line. Daniel Jones works well with a very good running game, and you're going to have that with Jonathan Taylor. And Daniel Jones can also run with it himself. And they have a nice core of young wide receivers, and they drafted one of the best tight ends in the draft in Tyler Warren. So Daniel Jones does have, I'm not going to say, a supporting cast that compares to, let's say, the Vikings or something, but I think there's enough talent around him where he could be okay in certain spots. He could be okay. And like I said, he also adds his own dimension to the game if he has to run with it as well. We'll see. I'm not, and I've seen some highlights of Daniel Jones from this preseason, and some overthrows, and it could be a long season for the Colts. And I liked some of the moves they made. They improved the secondary. Their defense has been a problem for years, along with the quarterback position. And they made a couple of additions in the secondary that I liked. And like I said, I don't think their offense on paper is bad. They got good players on that side of the ball. So, maybe change the scenery for Daniel Jones. Maybe he could do something. But I mean, especially in this conference. I don't see the Colts really doing anything this year. I don't. I think the Texans are obviously the best team in the division. Jacksonville's going to be improved. And we'll see with the Titans and Cam Ward. But I would probably rank them last. Well, I did if you go back and watch the ranking videos that I did with Dami. So, yeah, we'll have to see how it all goes. But I don't think the Colts are going to be one of the worst teams record-wise. Because, I mean, despite the issues that they had last year, I think they finished around 8 wins. So, maybe you get close to that, if that. They open up the season against the Dolphins, which I don't think is that tough of a matchup. Although I kind of lean towards the Dolphins week 1. But let's see, the Colts schedule. So you got the Dolphins, then you got the Broncos at home. That's going to be a tough game. You got the Titans, so that could go either way. At the Rams, home against the Raiders, the Cardinals, at the Chargers, home against the Titans, at the Steelers, home against the Falcons. Then you got a bye week 11. Then week 12, out of the bye, at Kansas City, home against the Texans, home against the Jags, at the Seahawks, 49ers at home, Jaguars at home, and then the Texans on the road. So out of the bye week, the schedule's pretty tough for them. They do have 4 divisional games. We'll see. So Daniel Jones is the starter, Anthony Richardson on the bench. I mean, could we see Anthony Richardson potentially this year? I mean, it's possible because, look, Daniel Jones, not like he's durable. He gets hurt. So that could lead to Anthony Richardson starting, and maybe Daniel Jones is even worse than Anthony Richardson, and then you have to put Anthony Richardson back in. I don't know. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they're going to give Daniel Jones the runway. And unless he's really, really bad, then you take him out, but I don't think so. I think Daniel Jones this is going to be his job. And again, big picture, everybody. And he had some recent comments, regrets on how the end went, but this would not be happening if Andrew Luck didn't retire. If the Colts were able to build an offensive line around him sooner, Andrew Luck would be the quarterback right now. And he said he'd be playing, till he's, into his 40s, between the ages of 40 and 45, 40 to 45. It's one of the most one of the biggest what ifs, I think, when you look at the NFL is if Andrew Luck didn't retire. Because 2018, I mean, he comes back, he plays the whole year, he plays great, they make the playoffs, they lose to Kansas City, but then it's like, all right, the Colts are back, Andrew Luck is back. Let's see, let's see what they could do, and then he calls it a career. So it's just one of the biggest what ifs. It's very sad because and how it ended, and Colt fans were booing him as he's going back into the tunnel with that preseason game. And they've gone through so many quarterbacks. So many. Veteran guys, from Phillip Rivers to Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan, Gardner Minshew and Daniel Jones. Now it's Daniel Jones. Well, they drafted Anthony Richardson, but now he's not the answer. They can't get it right. They can't get it right. It's very unfortunate, but that's just how it is. So let me know what you guys think though about the things we talked about. Football is getting closer. Final week of preseason is this week, and then we got the real thing coming up. Cowboys Eagles to get it started. So as always, everybody, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the video and to the channel. Greatly appreciate it. Make sure to also follow us on the social media platforms that are in the description down below on the video. And as always, wherever you get your podcasts, you can listen to us as well. Look up Infinite Sports and you'll find us there. So as always, everybody, I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, signing off. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care.